Hey guys, tonight, let's slow down together. Dim the lights. Let the world outside fall quiet. Let the noise of the day fade into the background. Because tonight, we're not chasing distractions. We're not scrolling endlessly. We're not running after validation. Tonight, we're going deeper. Have you ever wondered why you often feel out of sync with the world around you? Why the conversations in crowded rooms sometimes feel shallow, as if people are racing to speak, but no one is truly saying anything? Why you sit back quietly, not because you have nothing to say, but because you already see the bigger picture. If that's you, listen carefully, because it might not mean you're different in the wrong way. It might mean you're smarter than most people. And the truth is, real intelligence is rarely loud, never desperate, and almost always silent. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And in a world where so many waste their energy trying to be seen, trying to be heard, trying to be validated, your greatest advantage might be your quiet strength, the quality of your inner world. Tonight, we're going to explore 7 signs you are smarter than most people. Not the kind of intelligence measured on standardized tests. Not the kind that brags in boardrooms or shouts on social media. But the kind of intelligence that makes you unshakable. The kind that whispers rather than yells. The kind that lives in silence, in clarity, and in self-mastery. Stay with me through this journey, because I promise it will not just describe you. It will remind you of who you are. And by the end, you will see that what makes you different is exactly what makes you powerful. So, let's begin. Sign 1. You stay silent. When everyone's talking nonsense, there's something unsettling about walking into a room where everyone is speaking at once. Voices overlap. Arguments build on half-truths. People toss opinions around like confetti, desperate not to be left out of the noise. You've seen it. You've felt it, the scramble to be heard, even when nothing meaningful is being said. And in those moments, you don't jump in. You don't fight to prove your knowledge. You don't try to outshout the loudest voice. Instead, you sit quietly, watching, listening, piecing together the truth between the lines. That silence of yours, it isn't weakness, it's discipline. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." And you live by that. Because you know silence isn't empty. It's full of awareness, full of strategy, full of strength. The world often mistakes volume for value. But you know the truth: the more someone needs to prove their intelligence, the less secure they actually are. Those who brag usually have the least to show. Those who argue endlessly often reveal more about their insecurity than their wisdom. And those who talk too much, they always give away more than they intend. You've learned something rare. Silence is not the absence of power. Silence is power. In fact, your silence unsettles people. It makes them nervous. Why? Because they can't read you. They can't predict you. They can't pull you into their games. While they scramble to dominate the room, you're not reacting, you're studying. You're not trying to win attention. You're conserving energy. You're not desperate to be noticed, you already know who you are. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Those words are etched into how you live. You don't throw your words around like cheap coins. You spend them like currency, rarely, intentionally, and only where it matters. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how, when you finally do speak, people fall silent? It's not because you shout. It's not because you demand attention. It's because your words carry weight. They aren't fluff. They aren't filler. They're precise. They're sharpened. They're worth hearing. And that's what sets you apart. In a world terrified of silence, you've made peace with it. You don't fear the pause in a conversation. You don't rush to fill the air just to feel important. You sit calmly because you've mastered yourself. And when you do finally choose to speak, you don't just add to the noise, you elevate it. Carl Jung once said, "The ability to be alone with your thoughts is a sign of inner strength." And that's exactly what your silence reflects. Strength, clarity, discipline. Modern life punishes silence. In offices, in schools, in friendships. People often confuse talking with contributing. They believe the loudest person is the leader. The fastest speaker is the smartest. But time and truth always reveal the opposite. The person who listens, the one who absorbs. The one who speaks only when necessary, that's the person who understands more than anyone else in the room. Maybe you weren't always like this. Maybe there was a time you over-explained, talked too much, tried to fill silence out of nervousness. But life taught you. Disappointment taught you. Being misunderstood taught you. And somewhere along the way, you learned that silence could protect you, guide you, strengthen you. Seneca once said speech is the mirror of the soul. As a man speaks, so is he. You've taken that to heart. You no longer broadcast every thought, you refine them. You no longer speak just to prove something, you wait until what you say matters. And so, while others rush to be liked, to be validated, to be heard, you sit quietly, watching, waiting, reading the room. And in that stillness, you carry something more valuable than attention. You carry awareness. That's what makes you dangerous, not in a violent way, but in the sense that people can't manipulate you, can't easily read you, can't shake you. They may underestimate you. But when you finally move, when you finally speak, you change the entire atmosphere. Because real intelligence doesn't need to announce itself. It just exists. Quiet, steady, powerful. So remember this the next time you find yourself sitting in a room full of noise, and you choose silence, don't doubt yourself. Don't mistake your restraint for weakness. That silence is not emptiness. That silence is strength. And that silence is one of the clearest signs that you are smarter than most people. Sign 2. You read between the lines always. There's a certain exhaustion that comes with pretending not to see what you actually see. Most people live this way. They ignore the gut feelings. They brush off the subtle inconsistencies. They silence that inner voice that whispers, "Something's not right here." But you can't do that. You've been taught too many times by life that ignoring the signs comes with a heavy cost. You don't just listen to words. You watch the pauses. You notice the hesitation. You study the tone, the energy, the timing. Someone may say the right thing, but their body betrays them. Their smile doesn't reach their eyes. Their kindness feels transactional. Their enthusiasm seems forced. And while everyone else takes their words at face value, you read the deeper script. You see the truth beneath the surface. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth." You've adopted that mindset, but not everyone has. Most people don't really want truth. They want comfort. They want illusions. They want to believe the story that feels good, not the one that is real. But you've chosen clarity over convenience. And that makes you different. It also makes you dangerous, because people can't manipulate you the way they manipulate others. The flattery doesn't land. The charm doesn't blind you. The sob stories don't trick you. While others are swept away by emotions, you're noticing the gaps, the contradictions, the parts that don't align. You've trained your mind to pay attention not to what's said once, but to what's repeated without thinking. Not to what people declare in public, but how they behave when no one is watching. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And you've taken that not just inward, but outward. You examine people not to judge, but to understand. Because you know that patterns matter more than promises. A person's habits tell you more than their words ever could. Maybe this ability of yours was born out of disappointment. Maybe you've been lied to. Maybe you've trusted too quickly. Maybe you've been burned by those who smiled to your face but plotted behind your back. Those experiences didn't break you, they sharpened you. They taught you to read the room, to listen beyond the surface, to notice the smallest cracks in someone's mask. And yes, sometimes it feels heavy to live like this. Sometimes you wish you could just float through conversations like everyone else, smile, nod, and take people at their word. But you can't. You see too much. You sense too much. And once your eyes are open, you can never close them again. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's exactly what you've done. You've made the unconscious visible. You've trained yourself to notice what others ignore. You don't call it paranoia. You call it clarity. Consider modern life. Think about social media. People post carefully curated images, smiles, vacations, achievements. But if you look closely, you can see the exhaustion in their eyes, the loneliness in their captions, the insecurity in the way they seek constant validation. Most people consume that content and feel envy. You see the deeper reality, the cracks, the contradictions, the longing behind the highlight reel. Or think about work environments. Someone praises you loudly in a meeting, but their energy is off. Their timing is too convenient. Their support disappears the moment credit is handed out. You notice. You always notice. And while others are caught off guard later, you already knew. Epictetus said it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. You've witnessed that truth in real time. Most people think they know others because they trust the surface. They assume they've got the whole picture, but you don't make that mistake. You leave room for observation. You give people time to reveal themselves. And they always do. This doesn't mean you're cynical. It means you're awake. You don't fall in love with potential, you pay attention to patterns. You don't get fooled by grand promises, you measure consistency. You don't rush to judgment, you wait and see. And in that patience, you protect yourself. Seneca once wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." You understand this deeply. When someone betrays your trust or shows their true colors, you don't lash out. You don't need a dramatic confrontation. You just step back quietly, decisively. You cut access. You guard your energy. That's the kind of intelligence most people can't recognize because they're too busy chasing illusions. But you've chosen truth, even when it hurts, even when it isolates you, even when it makes you stand apart. And here's the paradox: when people are around you, they feel seen in a way they're not used to. Not because you're judging them, but because your presence mirrors back what they're trying to hide. That unsettles them. Some might call you intense, or hard to read, or even distant. But that's just the cost of refusing to play the shallow game. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, never esteem anything as of advantage to you that'll make you break your word or lose your self-respect. You live by that. You don't pretend not to notice just to fit in. You don't accept lies just because they're comfortable. You don't blind yourself to reality just because everyone else chooses illusion. And yes, sometimes it's lonely, but more often it's liberating. Because once you learn to read between the lines, you can never be blindsided again. You stop walking into traps. You stop giving your trust away too soon. You stop losing yourself in false promises. Instead, you move through the world with clarity, calm, collected, awake. And in a culture where most people are sleepwalking, drifting from one distraction to another, your awareness is rare. Your awareness is powerful. So the next time you notice yourself picking up on what others miss, the subtle glance, the hesitation, the contradiction, don't dismiss it. Don't downplay it. Recognize it for what it is: a sign of your intelligence. A sign that you're tuned to a frequency most people will never hear. Because while the world gets lost in words, you're listening to the silence between them. And that is what makes you smarter than most people. Sign 3. Your curiosity isn't just cute, it's strategic. Most people drift through life on autopilot. They accept what they're told. They consume without question. They nod politely when someone gives them an answer, even if that answer doesn't fully make sense. They are content with surface-level explanations, with half-truths, with the comfort of not digging too deep. But your mind refuses to stop there. You don't just accept. You don't just consume. You don't just move along. You take things apart. You ask why. You look beneath the hood of everything. You want to know how it works, why it matters, and what it reveals. And here's the key. Your curiosity isn't random. It isn't chaotic. It isn't just the playful wandering of a restless mind. No, your curiosity is intentional. It's strategic. It's a weapon you wield, a compass you follow, a tool you use to carve clarity out of the fog. Seneca once wrote, "If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable." Most people are curious in the shallow sense, asking questions out of boredom or distraction. But you use curiosity to navigate. You use it to chart your course. You use it to make sense of the rules of the game so that you can decide which ones to follow and which ones to break. Think about how this plays out in modern life. When you watch a movie, you don't just get lost in the story. You notice the pacing, the cuts, the rhythm of the dialogue. You ask, why did this scene work? Why did that moment feel powerful? When someone compliments you, you don't just smile and move on. You ask yourself, what prompted that? What does it mean? Where is it leading? That's not paranoia. That's awareness. That's you using curiosity to sharpen your understanding of the world. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look." And that's exactly what your curiosity does. It looks outward at the world. Yes, but it also turns inward. You don't just study the systems around you, you study yourself. You ask, why did that upset me? Why did I react that way? What can I learn from this? That inner questioning is what keeps you from drifting. It's what keeps you awake in a world that wants you asleep. Let me tell you why this matters. Most people live reactive lives. They chase trends. They copy what worked for someone else. They consume without digesting. They take the fastest route because it looks appealing, only to crash later. But you're studying the map. You're not looking for shortcuts. You're looking for patterns. You're reverse engineering success, not to copy it, but to create your own system, your own path. Epictetus once said, "Only the educated are free." He wasn't talking about degrees or certificates. He was talking about self-education, the kind that frees you from dependency. And that's what your curiosity gives you, freedom. Because you don't wait for others to hand you answers. You go out and find them. You don't stop when things get confusing. You dig deeper. You don't accept appearances. You want the truth. And let's be real, sometimes it's exhausting, isn't it? Sometimes you wish you could just shut it off, to enjoy something without dissecting it, to watch, to listen, to participate without analyzing every piece. But it's not in your wiring. You've trained your mind to be alive, and that's a gift, even if it comes with restlessness. Because look at what it gives you. You catch opportunities before others see them. You spot problems before they explode. You understand people before they understand themselves. You see connections that others overlook. And that's not luck, that's the reward of a curious mind that never stops working. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." Your curiosity ensures that you never stop learning yourself and never stop learning the world. You don't just drift through, you navigate. You don't just react, you anticipate. Let's bring this to a modern example. Think about entrepreneurs, innovators, thinkers who change the world. They all share the same trait, relentless curiosity. Steve Jobs didn't just accept the way technology was, he asked how it could be different. Elon Musk doesn't just watch how rockets are built, he questions every step. Marie Curie didn't just accept the limits of science, she pushed past them because she kept asking why not. That's what your mind does too. Maybe not with rockets or radiation, but in your own life. You see something everyone else takes for granted, and you ask, what if, why, how? And from that, you create a new path. Carl Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. But you do both. You study the world with obsessive attention, and then you filter it through your inner compass. That's how you stay ahead without losing yourself. And here's what people don't understand. Curiosity isn't just about gathering knowledge. It's about leverage. The right question opens the right door. The right insight exposes the weak spot in a system. The right observation changes the trajectory of your choices. Most people are playing the game blindly. You're studying the rules, the loopholes, the incentives, and then deciding how to move. That's not cute curiosity. That's strategy. That's intelligence. That's wisdom in motion. So don't ever downplay your curiosity. Don't let anyone dismiss it as overthinking or make you feel strange for needing to know more. It's not random, it's deliberate. It's not shallow, it's powerful. Because while others are entertained by the show, you're studying the script. While others are reacting to results, you're analyzing the design. While others are waiting for someone to tell them what to do, you've already figured out your next move. And that's what sets you apart. So the next time your mind asks another question, the next time you're restless, probing, searching, don't silence it. Feed it. Because that's your edge. That's your strength. That's the sign of a mind that isn't just alive, but awake. And in a world that runs on autopilot, nothing is more powerful than that. Sign 4. You're never bored. Your mind is a playground. Most people can't sit still. The silence of an empty room terrifies them. The absence of stimulation feels like suffocation. They reach for their phones. They scroll mindlessly. They binge-watch shows they don't even enjoy. Anything to avoid facing their own thoughts. But you're different. You've learned that solitude isn't punishment, it's power. You've discovered that your mind is more than capable of keeping itself alive, curious and creative, even without external noise. When others panic in silence, you find peace. When others need constant entertainment, you generate your own. And that ability is one of the clearest signs that you are smarter than most people. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." Those words are not just poetic, they're practical. They remind us that the strongest fortress, the most unshakable home, is the one you build within yourself. When you sit alone, you don't feel empty, you feel expansive. You replay conversations, analyze ideas, sketch out plans, visualize possibilities. You construct entire worlds inside your mind without ever leaving the room. Your thoughts aren't a cage, they're a canvas. And the silence that suffocates others for you, it's oxygen. Carl Jung once said, "Solitude is for me a fountain of healing which makes my life worth living." You know exactly what he meant, because in solitude, your mind sharpens instead of dulling. Your imagination expands instead of shrinking. You don't rely on the world to hand you stimulation, you create it within. And that's not just a quirk, that's mental stamina. That's inner discipline. That's brilliance in motion. Think about how rare this is today. We live in a world built on distraction. Every second, there's a new notification, a new headline, a new thing screaming for your attention. Our culture has conditioned people to believe that boredom is the enemy, that silence is failure, that stillness is wasted time. But here's the truth. Boredom only threatens those who haven't built a life inside their own minds. If you have no inner world, you're forced to constantly escape into the external one. That's why so many can't stand quiet rooms. Why they need constant scrolling. Why they panic without stimulation. But you've built a fortress within. You've trained your mind to reflect, to imagine, to analyze, to create. You've made silence your ally instead of your enemy. Seneca once wrote, "The mind that is anxious about future events is miserable. But what about the mind that stays present, rooted in thought?" exploring calmly without rushing to the next distraction. That mind isn't anxious. That mind isn't miserable. That mind is powerful. And that's what you've developed. Maybe you didn't always have it. Maybe once. Silence made you uneasy. Maybe you used to distract yourself because you didn't like where your thoughts wandered. But over time, you did the work. You faced your thoughts instead of running from them. You allowed your imagination to stretch instead of cutting it short. You turned reflection into a habit. And now you rarely even feel bored because your mind is always alive. Think about modern examples. Look at the greatest thinkers, artists, inventors. They weren't constantly stimulated by the outside world. They spent long hours alone, turning inward, drawing from their inner depths. Nikola Tesla used solitude to design his inventions in his head before ever touching a tool. Leonardo da Vinci spent hours sketching ideas from his imagination. Writers, philosophers, leaders, all of them understood that the richest playground is the one inside. That's what you've tapped into. You don't wait for the world to entertain you. You build your own stories. You don't depend on external noise to feel alive. You cultivate energy from within. That kind of independence is rare. That kind of presence is revolutionary. Aristotle once said, "The energy of the mind is the essence of life." And your life proves it, because your mind doesn't need distraction to feel vibrant. It generates its own vitality. And here's something most people don't realize: the ability to sit still with your own thoughts is not just peaceful, it's dangerous. Why? Because a mind that cannot be bored is a mind that cannot be manipulated. A mind that isn't desperate for stimulation cannot be controlled by urgency, by trends, by noise. It thinks clearly. It resists pressure. It makes better decisions. That's you. You're not reactive, you're intentional. You're not lost in distraction. You're grounded in thought. You're not enslaved to the external world, you're free within the internal one. And freedom like that changes everything. So the next time someone looks at you and says, "Don't you get bored just sitting there?" smile gently, because you know the truth. You're not bored, you're alive. You're exploring. You're connecting dots. You're building a world inside yourself that no one can touch. No system can control. No distraction can steal. Your silence isn't emptiness. Your stillness isn't weakness. Your solitude isn't loneliness. It's strength. It's clarity. It's freedom. And in a world where people fear being alone, your comfort in solitude is one of the clearest signs that you are smarter than most people. Sign 5. You don't brag. You just move in silence. Some people walk into a room and announce themselves before they've even said a word. They talk louder than necessary. They sprinkle their sentences with name drops. They repeat facts they half remember from books. Not because they've lived them, but because they crave the illusion of sounding intelligent. And then there's you. You don't compete for the spotlight. You don't scramble to prove what you know. You don't interrupt to correct every mistake in someone else's speech. Instead, you lean back. You observe. You let the noise pass over you like waves on a shore. You don't need to prove your intelligence, you live it, quietly, intentionally, powerfully. Epictetus once said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. At first, those words sting. Who wants to be thought foolish? Who wants to be underestimated? But you've learned the deeper truth There is strength in being misjudged. There is freedom in being underestimated. There is power in moving unseen. Because here's the secret: the moment you start bragging about your intelligence, you've already given it away. You've shifted the focus from the work itself to other people's recognition of it. You've turned your power into something dependent on applause. And once you depend on recognition, you've already lost. But you refuse to play that game. You don't need to broadcast your wins. You don't need to plaster your achievements across every conversation. You don't need to correct every mistake just to feel superior. You let people underestimate you. You let them assume. You let them think they've outpaced you. And then, while they're busy talking, you move quietly ahead. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That's how you live. You don't argue about your value. You embody it. You don't shout about your vision, you build it. You don't waste time trying to convince others, you let your life speak for you. And let's be clear, moving in silence doesn't mean you're timid. It doesn't mean you're hiding. It doesn't mean you lack confidence. No, moving in silence means you understand the value of restraint. It means you know that the strongest moves are the ones no one sees coming. Think about it. The loudest people in the room rarely hold the most power. The ones who broadcast their every step often stall before the finish line. Why? Because when everyone sees your move, they can block it. When everyone knows your plan, they can sabotage it. But when you move in silence, there's nothing to block, nothing to stop, nothing to anticipate. That's strategy. That's intelligence. That's wisdom. Carl Jung once said, "The most dangerous things are not those that shout, but those that whisper." That's you. Low volume, high impact, calm on the surface, unstoppable underneath. And here's the paradox: your silence makes more noise than their shouting ever could. Your calm presence unsettles people. They feel something but can't put their finger on it. They know you're holding more than you reveal. They sense depth they can't quite reach. And that unsettles them. But you don't mind. You've outgrown the need for validation. You've stopped chasing applause. You've stopped explaining yourself just to be understood. You've learned that silence can't be misquoted. You've learned that strategy works best when it's invisible. You've learned that true strength is proven not in announcements, but in results. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Craving recognition is one of the most subtle forms of poverty, and you refuse to live poor. You don't crave recognition, you crave purpose. You don't chase applause, you chase mastery. You don't need the world to understand you, you understand yourself. And because of that, you've built something unshakable. Think about modern life. Look at social media. The endless cycle of people broadcasting their highlights, exaggerating their wins, selling the image of success. But behind the curtain, how much of it is real? How much of it is sustainable? You see through it. You understand that what's loud often lacks substance. You've chosen a different path, one where your life's work speaks for itself, long after the noise fades. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." And when you know yourself deeply, you no longer beg others to see you. You no longer need the world's approval. You no longer crave to be understood by people who aren't even trying to understand themselves. That's why you don't brag. That's why you don't flex. That's why you don't shout your plans from the rooftops. Because you know that while others are busy updating everyone on their progress, you're making actual progress. While they're chasing trends, you're building something timeless. While they're addicted to attention, you're addicted to growth. And here's the truth. The people who underestimate you today will wish they had paid closer attention tomorrow. By the time they realize how far you've gone, you'll already be untouchable. So remember this, your silence is not emptiness, it's strategy. Your restraint is not weakness, it's strength. Your humility is not invisibility, it's focus. You don't brag, you just move. Quietly, sharply, unstoppably. And that is what makes you smarter than most people. Sign 6. You make people think it was their idea. There's a certain kind of intelligence that never needs to dominate a conversation. It doesn't interrupt. It doesn't demand to be right. It doesn't insist on credit. Instead, it listens carefully, patiently, attentively. And when it speaks, it does so in a way that allows others to believe they discovered the truth themselves. That's you. You've learned something most people never figure out. Forcing your ideas on others rarely works. The more you try to prove you're right, the more resistant people become. The more you push, the harder they pull back. Ego gets in the way of progress. Pride builds walls that no amount of shouting can tear down. But you take a different path. You don't argue. You don't fight to be heard. You don't rush to correct every mistake. Instead, you ask questions. Questions that guide. Questions that provoke thought. Questions that make someone pause and reflect in ways they hadn't before. And then, without even realizing it, they arrive at the conclusion you already knew. And when they do, they own it. They believe it was their idea. And because it feels like their own, they embrace it more fully than if you had handed it to them outright. That's not manipulation. That's wisdom. That's maturity. That's Stoic strategy. Plato once said, wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something. You live that truth. You don't speak just to win points. You don't correct people mid-sentence just to prove superiority. You don't need the ego boost of being the smartest voice in the room. Instead, you let people come to clarity in their own time, in their own way. And in that, your influence is far greater than the loudest debater or the sharpest tongue, because you're not battling for control, you're guiding toward truth. Think about how this plays out in modern life. Maybe you've had a friend stuck in a toxic relationship. You didn't lecture them. You didn't bombard them with statistics about breakups or warnings about red flags. You simply asked, do you feel more free with this person? Or less? And in that simple question, you planted a seed. That seed grew into reflection. Reflection grew into realization. And eventually, they chose to leave not because you forced them, but because you gave them space to discover what was true. Or perhaps at work, you've had a colleague stuck on a problem. Instead of handing them the solution, you asked, what have you tried so far? What's blocking you? What outcome do you really want? And suddenly, as they answered, they uncovered the solution themselves. Later, they thanked you, not realizing you had quietly guided them all along. That's your power. You don't need the spotlight. You don't need the credit. You just want clarity. You just want results. You just want truth. Seneca once wrote, He who is brave is free, and part of bravery is letting go of the need for validation. You are free from the addiction to credit. You are free from the need to control the narrative. You are free from the fragile ego that demands recognition. And because you're free, you can guide others without chains. Carl Jung once said, "Thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge. You've chosen the harder path. You make people think. You resist the easy temptation to criticize, to dominate, to impose. Instead, you give silence. You give space. You give nudges that turn into breakthroughs. And people feel that. They may not always understand it, but they feel it. They feel more capable around you. They feel wiser around you. They feel seen without being pressured. And that's because you've mastered the art of subtle influence. Most people measure intelligence by how loudly they can prove themselves. You measure intelligence by how deeply you can shift someone's perspective without them even realizing it was you who shifted it. And here's the beauty: this isn't just about social skill. It's about alignment with Stoic wisdom. Epictetus reminded us, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. You've applied that truth to conversations. You don't react by trying to dominate. You respond by guiding. You don't waste energy trying to win arguments. You use your energy to change outcomes. And here's what makes this so powerful: when people believe something is their own idea, they don't resist it. They don't fight it. They embrace it. They live it. They defend it. And so your influence lasts longer. It embeds deeper. It reshapes lives without you needing to take the credit. In a culture addicted to recognition, that's rare. Most people would rather be known as the one who was right than actually help someone arrive at truth. But you've let go of the ego that demands ownership. And in that letting go, you've found a greater strength. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And in the same way, the best influence is not to dominate like everyone else. It's to guide, to elevate, to empower, to let people see for themselves. And yes, sometimes that means you'll never get the credit. Sometimes people will walk away thinking they figured it all out on their own. Sometimes you'll be forgotten in the story of their breakthrough. But you don't mind, because you weren't there for credit. You were there for clarity. That's why people underestimate you at first. They mistake your quietness for detachment. They think you're passive, but over time, they realize you've been the quiet current guiding the river all along. And that is the mark of higher intelligence. Not the need to be seen, but the strength to remain unseen. Not the urge to take credit, but the wisdom to let others grow without even knowing you were the gardener. So the next time you find yourself holding back, choosing not to argue, choosing to ask instead of demand, don't doubt yourself. That restraint is brilliance. That patience is power. That silence is influence. Because while others shout to be remembered, you whisper and transform. And that is why you are smarter than most people. Sign 7. You don't react. You wait, watch, and strike. Most people blur the line between feeling something and being controlled by it. Someone insults them, they lash out. Someone questions them, they argue back immediately. Someone disagrees, they take it as an attack. And they spend the rest of the day defending their pride. That is how most people live: reactive, impulsive, predictable. But you've learned something different. You've learned that just because you feel disrespected doesn't mean you have to show it. Just because someone tries to provoke you doesn't mean you have to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Just because you feel the sting of offense doesn't mean you hand over your peace. You've separated reaction from response, and that separation has given you a kind of inner power most people will never taste. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Those words live in you because you've experienced what happens when you react without thought. You lose control. You give your power away. You let someone else set the terms of your behavior. But when you pause, when you wait, when you let the fire burn out before you move, you take that power back. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. You've taken that truth to heart. You no longer hand your peace to anyone who pokes at your ego. You no longer flinch when someone tests your composure. You no longer waste energy trying to prove your worth to people who don't even understand their own. Instead, you wait, you watch, you let people show you who they are. And here's what makes it so unsettling for others: they can't read you. They don't know where you stand. They don't know what you're thinking. They expect a reaction, but instead, they're met with silence. They expect you to fight, but you don't. They expect you to collapse, but you stay calm. And in that silence, in that composure, you reveal more strength than shouting ever could. Aristotle once wrote, "Anybody can become angry, that is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not easy. That is the path you've chosen. Not to be emotionless, but to be emotionally trained. Not to suppress your feelings, but to master them." And mastery like this is rare in modern life. Everything is designed to provoke you. Headlines are designed to outrage you. Social media comments are designed to bait you. Advertisements are designed to stir your fears or your desires. Entire industries profit from your reactivity, because a reactive mind is a predictable mind. A reactive person is an easy person to manipulate. But you resist. You see the trap. You understand that every reaction is a transaction. It costs time. It costs energy. It costs peace. And you've decided not to spend those things carelessly anymore. Think about how this plays out in everyday life. Someone cuts you off in traffic. The average person explodes, yelling, honking, letting anger poison their entire day. But you breathe. You release it. You know it's not worth giving away your energy. Or at work, someone tries to undermine you in a meeting. The average person jumps in defensively, scrambling to protect their image. But you observe. You let them talk. You let them overplay their hand. And when the time is right, you respond not with emotion, but with precision. Seneca once said, "A sword never kills anybody. It is a tool in the killer's hand." The same is true of words, of reactions, of emotions. They are tools, and you've learned not to swing wildly. You keep your sword sheathed until the moment it matters. And when you draw it, when you finally decide to act, your words land sharper. Your presence cuts deeper, because you waited. This isn't passivity. This isn't weakness. This is discipline. This is patience as strategy. Most people exhaust themselves in battles that don't matter. They argue endlessly. They fight over scraps of pride. They burn their energy on people and situations that add nothing to their growth. You conserve. You watch. You store your strength. You play the long game. And when you strike, it isn't out of anger. It's out of clarity. It's out of choice. That's why your presence lingers in people's minds. Because you don't react to every poke, every insult, every provocation. You choose your moments. And when you do choose to act, people remember it. Carl Jung once said, "Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness." And the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. You've accepted that darkness, the sting of disrespect, the ache of being underestimated, the heaviness of silence. But you don't let it shake you. You let it sharpen you. And here's what most people will never understand. Silence can be more devastating than shouting. Stillness can be more powerful than fury. Patience can be more destructive to your enemies than any outburst could ever be. Because when you stay calm, you force people to sit with themselves, with their words, with their choices, with their mistakes. And that discomfort, that silence, it exposes them more than any argument ever could. You've become the person who doesn't need to win every battle because you're focused on winning the war. You don't need to defend every attack because you know your strength isn't up for debate. You don't need to correct every lie because truth has a way of revealing itself in time. And that's what sets you apart. You don't react. You wait. You watch. You strike, not often, but precisely. And that is a sign of mastery, a sign of discipline, a sign of intelligence that cannot be faked. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, remember this: your silence is not weakness. Your patience is not surrender. Your calm is not emptiness. It is strength. It is clarity. It is control. In a world that rewards noise, you've chosen depth. In a culture addicted to reactivity, you've chosen patience. In a society that confuses loudness with value, you've chosen wisdom. And that is why you are smarter than most people. We come to the close of this journey. Take a deep breath. Let the noise of the day dissolve. Let the weight you've been carrying slowly ease from your shoulders. Remember, these signs are not there to make you feel separate from the world, but to remind you of the quiet strength already alive within you. The world may measure intelligence in loud words, in quick wins, in flashy recognition, but the Stoics taught us a different truth. Wisdom is found in silence, in patience, in restraint, in the ability to see clearly when others are blinded by noise. You do not need to prove yourself. You do not need to explain yourself. You only need to keep walking steadily, calmly, faithfully, on the path that aligns with your values. That is where your strength lives. That is where your mind becomes unshakable. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." So let your thoughts tonight be steady. Let them be clear. Let them be yours. And if tonight's words have spoken to something deep within you, consider leaving a quiet mark, subscribe channel, share your reflections in the comments, or simply whisper a promise to yourself to keep sharpening your mind. For now, let the stillness surround you. Let the silence remind you of who you are. You are steady. You are clear. You are enough. Sleep well, my friend, until we meet again.